Welcome, it's been a long time, but the Dressing Gown Diaries is back in action. I've had the Mayminator on me regularly, asking where it is, missing his toilet time, where you can hear me rant for 5 minutes about pointless rubbish. But yet there are some people that quite like it. There's been a lot going on in the autumn internationals. I'll try and cover off some of it. Clearly we can't take the meat off all the bone, but we'll go through. So where do we think the teams are at? Well, Ireland have got the result of the autumn. A comfortable victory against the All Blacks. Never really looked in doubt. The pace of play they couldn't cope with. Ireland look like they're progressing, but they've done this before in the autumn. The true test for them, I suppose, comes in the Six Nations. Can they bring the same thing? Scotland, flattering to deceive. A great victory against Australia. Throwing it away against South Africa. Again, so pleasing on the eye to watch an attack, but you worry in defence. What can they do? You've got Horn coming out saying this is the best defence out there. I just don't see it myself. They concede points too easily, too regularly. I know that's the high-risk game that they play because they do look to score tries, but there just seem to be these unforced errors. Against South Africa, they had penalties, kicked for the corner, lost the line out. You can't really afford to do that against these top sides. England look like they are middling. It's difficult to really tell. Australia were poor last weekend. England did enough to put them away. The question England pose themselves or have is, one, how do they fit Simmons in, who's a great player? And two, do they have to adapt the game plan for Marcus Smith? It feels to me a bit like Eddie Jones now is the Jose Mourinho of rugby. Yes, he's one thing, well, not one thing. He's been a very successful manager and coach, but doesn't seem to have adapted to the way the game is. He's thrown a guy like Marcus Smith now. He's an epic player, but he doesn't play so much to structure. He looks up, sees what there and goes. Now that doesn't quite work. I can imagine the point of, he'd go for a break, England would score a try, and then Eddie would bollock him for not playing the structured plan that they wanted. I don't see how that formation works together. And I'm not sure Farrell at 12 inside Marcus Smith really works either. Because again, you're taking away from Marcus Smith that kind of expansive, creative player. We know that Farrell is rigid and structured. And I've been talking about this for a while. I think Farrell has probably run his course for England, but as a Welshman, I'm loving seeing him there. It limits the way England play. He's a great competitor, but he's a 7 out of 10 now. That's not really good enough at some creative positions at 10 and 12. And Eddie Jones, the same thing. He's kind of limiting England. As a Welsh fan, this is brilliant. Keep it going on. Moving on to Wales. Well, starting against New Zealand with 20 players unavailable was never going to be that easy. They did well against South Africa. It was a tight game, a couple of small indiscretions costing Wales the match in the end. And against Fiji, a sending off. Wales against Fiji, sending off and then a yellow card and still struggling to score against 13 men. Doesn't really say much about the attack, but it seems like they're a team in transition again. Lots of the big players are out, so Alwyn Jones, Jonathan Davis dropped for this weekend. As ever, Wales play Australia. It's normally one of the last games in the autumn. Australia may be poor in the other games, but then suddenly they rock up. They drop the ball so many times against England. You can guarantee against Wales, it'll be slick rugby, decoy runners all over the shop, and they'll score tries like there's no tomorrow. England host South Africa in a replay of the World Cup final. Again, it'll be dull as anything. It'll just be a massive bang fest. But I'm sure many of the England supporters who watch the DGD will enjoy. And then the autumn concludes with France hosting New Zealand in what should be an epic battle. New Zealand smarting from last weekend's Ireland loss. Will be looking to come back. The other news that's come out this week, finally World Rugby have stepped up and kicked Rassie Erasmus into touch. His treatment of the referee after the first lines test was nothing more than disgraceful. He deserves everything he gets. Water carrier, blah, blah, blah. Bugger off. You can't be doing this. We can't have you openly questioning referees in press forums afterwards. It's a disgrace, and any coach that does it should be reprimanded. The referee in rugby is sanctisant, and we should look after them. It's a tough job. They do the best they can, and clearly World Rugby will assess them anyway, and if they make mistakes, they're dropped down and you have to rejig. But it's good to see that World Rugby have actually grown some teeth and not bowing down to Rassie Erasmus. Anyway, look, this is the Dressing Gown Diary. It's over and out. You enjoy your weekends of rugby. There's lots on. Let's get it on.